Your board is either your greatest asset or your greatest risk. There is no middle ground. And most governance challenges do not come from conflict. They come from confusion. And it's the blind spots that you never name that cost you credibility, capacity, and control. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Nkoyo F. Young-Lewis, attorney, strategist, and creator of the Impact Triad Framework, your premier operating system for nonprofits that want to deepen their impact without burnout or apology. And this is the Governance in Real Time. This is a daily micro-training series equipping executive directors and board chairs to lead with clarity and courage in an environment of rising security and pressure. And if you saw the title, we are going to dig into what's going wrong with boards and how you can fix yours now before it's too late. And so in the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to break down the most common board blind spots that quietly weaken organizations, increase scrutiny, and create unnecessary friction for executive directors. And you will walk away with clarity on which blind spots exist in your board and how to begin addressing them with confidence. Ready? All right, let's go. So we're going to jump right into the very first blind spot. So the blind spot number one is the distinction between oversight and operations. I call this the oversight v. operations confusion. And many of you, once I start to talk in about it, will probably identify or see some aspects of your board here. A lot of boards struggle because they don't know where oversight ends and where operation begins. And I'm going to be honest, some of those lines are blurry, right? Your boards delegate day-to-day operations, the management of the nonprofit organization to the executive director. That's technically the way that the structure is set up. But there's a fine line, and we'll talk about that as we get to some of our future blind spots. So stay in, because if you don't see yourself here, you might show up in one of the next two blind spots that I'm going to discuss. So let me show you some signs that the blind spot is present. The probably biggest indicator is that your board members are micromanaging your staff. I've seen where board members are actually in communication with staff, not the executive director necessarily, but other staff members, guiding, directing, telling them what they need to do, talking to the board, executive director, and demanding that they transition staff members, etc., right? Really jumping into being in charge of what the staff is doing. Another blind spot is that the board wants to approve everything. There are no distinctions around what things actually require board approval. Your executive director, your senior leadership is not able to make decisions under a certain threshold without approval. And so once we get our board wanting to be a part of every single decision, having everything come to the board, we have likely walked into the oversight versus operation confusion. Or my personal other favorite is the exact opposite, right? The board disengages completely. They are not doing anything, right? You can't get them on the phone. You can't get them to make a decision. They're just like, hey, whatever you think, right? They're not providing any sort of strategic oversight, thought leadership, partnership, as you as the executive director, senior leadership team are bringing issues to them that they should be helping you to think through. And perhaps another sign of this blind spot is that you as the executive director or your organization's executive director, CEO, is overwhelmed because there are no other owners for decision. Everything falls on your senior most leaders' plate, and there's no support. They're trying to manage the board, manage the team, manage stakeholders and funders, and there's no support in sight. So they are overwhelmed with the sheer number of decisions and responsibilities that they have. And when we see that we have this oversight versus operations confusion, Clarity is essential. I know if you have been tracking with me since the beginning of the series, I think we're on day 7 now, I have probably used clarity a nauseating number of times, but I am telling you that clarity is kind, right? I think that's Brené Brown, but I believe that clarity actually helps all of us better understand what we're doing, what we should be doing, what we don't need to be doing, what we can stop doing. And that is useful because let me tell you one thing that is absolutely for certain and for sure. A confused board cannot protect the mission. If they are not clear on where their role is, where the line in the sand is drawn, and they are overstepping or completely disengaging, it is a huge risk for the organization actually being able to advance the mission. And if you are here rocking with me and the things that we talk about, we are all about deepening our impact. We are trying to transform the world. We are trying to disrupt the status quo in a way that actually creates a new threshold for what's possible for everyone. I didn't mention before, I believe myself to be a possibility broker. And so we're always dreaming in what is possible, not is what is here, but how do we get to what's possible, what we have yet to even imagine. And your board cannot help you do that if they're not even clear on what the ground rules are for where we are today. All right, so that first blind spot is that we have an oversight versus operations confusion. If you're seeing yourself in this space, drop a little thumbs up in the chat, whether you're watching live or on the replay. I look forward to going back and seeing these comments and seeing if this is hitting, if it's resonating with what you're feeling. And if it's not, well, let's jump to blind spot number 2. And so blind spot number 2 is one of my favorites. I'm biased. Is a lack of governance training and support. I got into trouble on the Threads app talking about how we don't need all these high profile names and titles on our boards, especially if they don't know what they're doing or they're not doing anything, right? And I'll tell you, the traditional nonprofit consultant world came for me, but I stand 10 toes down on that. We have a lot of boards that are filled with talented people, titled people, fantastic people who've never been trained to govern, right? They might be leaders in their own rights. Everyone's looking for the CEO of something, the lawyer, the CPA, all the big titles, the marketing guru that everybody is telling you to do. And a lot of times these people are used to being doers, right? They are exceptional at what they do because they do things, right? And governing is different than doing. When we go back to that first blind spot around oversight versus operations, we aren't necessarily looking for people to do the thing. We're looking for people to give advice and counsel to make sure that whatever is supposed to be done actually gets done. And so for a lot of people, this is new. I cannot tell you the number of times I, as an attorney, and many of my attorney friends get solicited to sit on a board. And the number of quiet conversations I've had, DMs, PMs from people who are like, Nkoyo, but actually, what does it mean to be on a board? Like, what am I being asked to do? What's the time commitment? What's the responsibility? And I think that that's really important. A lot of times people don't know. They don't know and understand exactly how fiduciary duties work. And once they do, they're like, wait a minute, we got that D&O insurance, right? There's director and operating officers insurance. Are you sure? Like, what are the things that can make me personally liable? How often does it happen, right? They have a whole host of different questions when they understand the gravity and the responsibility that comes with being on a board. Yes, it's a great honor. Yes, it's fantastic for your resume and credibility and credentialing as someone who cares and is a leader in the community. But it's also a level of work and responsibility that we want to make sure we put the right people in place to do, and that we actually train them and help them understand the structure so we can avoid blind spot number 1 and some other blind spots. So when training is missing, we see shallow board meetings, right? There's not the depth, there's not the grit in really thinking about what's the future of the organization and how do we move it forward. We lack a lot of appropriate conversation around decisions, right? Because there are places where decision making takes like 8 meetings and a miracle to make happen because we're nitpicking over different things. We're fussing and fighting over the meeting minutes. We're getting really into the particulars of something rather than sort of keeping our vantage point of like when we need to look at the forest, when and who needs to zero in on the trees. And so when we're missing training, we get these shallow boarding meetings, or shallow in terms of, not a lot of depth, or shallow in that maybe it's like bickering and infighting and all sorts of other quiet relational things that are happening or not necessarily moving the work forward. When we lack training, we often will see that we lack real oversight. And here's the real problem with that, right? Like, of course, there's the extreme of like senior leadership, executive directors who are misappropriating funds, who are doing all sorts of things that are going to implicate your tax exempt status, right? There is aspects of that. But there's also issues of like, budgetary decisions that maybe don't make sense for the long term, right? There's some forecasting and predicting and imagining that needs to happen that doesn't get done. This is often where I see things like 990s fall through the wayside. They just didn't get signed. They didn't get filed for 3 years. And now you're auto revoked, right? And like, who should have been paying attention to those things? We have money that we can't account for, right? Restricted funds are used to pay for things that are not falling within the restricted funds category, but they get signed off on. And maybe our treasurer isn't really looking at the reports. We're not having conversations about resources and having a resource-filled organization. Perhaps we're also not having conversations about board members' role in resourcing the organization because they don't understand the responsibility as oversight also includes ensuring that the organization has what it needs to meet the mission. When we lack training, we see weak accountability, which kind of goes back to some of the issues that I named above. And it's not just accountability in terms of making sure that the organization is doing what it needs to do. It's accountability and even just showing up for the meetings that you said that you were going to be a part of, right? And so if you've ever been to a meeting, you've presented to the board, you sit on the board, and something is presented to you all, and you can't make quorum to make a decision, that's frustrating for everyone. And that slows down the process. And as we move into an environment where we're going to have to be more nimble on our feet, we just can't have people who are not attending. We're not able to make quorum. We're not able to actually make decisions and move things forward when there are a lot more forces and a lot more scrutiny around us. And so when we don't have this training, we sometimes see this weak accountability. We also see decisions that get driven by personality and not policy. I have worked with a number of boards where people don't know the policies, whether that's on staff or on the board. And so an issue arises. And then, of course, I'm like, well, great. Well, what's the policy? Is there a policy on this? What's the procedure? And that's the first time that we're all looking at it. Or we're going back to the bylaws because we've been operating and moving. And what we realize is that we don't even have a properly constituted board. So we, technically some of these things that we have been doing, we couldn't actually make those decisions because the board doesn't have the number of members it's supposed to, or quorum, or any number of things. And so we want to make sure that we're not just making decisions based on who's the loudest, who carries the most power, who has the most charisma in the organization, but that these are decisions that are rooted in our governing documents, which include the bylaws and the policies. And we are bound by that. And that's why there's so much record keeping to make sure that we are actually doing things in alignment with how we said we were going to do those things, especially as it relates to how we got our tax exempt status, which I like to remind people in the United States, where we fund or have in the past funded everything based on taxes, it is a huge thing to not have to pay federal income tax as a 501c3. C4, some of our other tax exempt organizations, that is a huge privilege. And so we want to honor that privilege and be responsible for that privilege by making sure that we're doing things in alignment with what we said we would be doing. The last little sign that what happens when training is missing is that we tend to have a reactive, crisis-driven culture. It's one thing after the other. It's a fire here, it's a fire there. Like, we're just bringing out the hose and trying to keep things from burning completely down, and we actually don't have an opportunity to lean into the mission and actually move it forward. And so we really do want to have training. We really do want to have the structure to actually equip people to be the best that they can be in the work that they're doing. So here's the thing. Governance is a skill. And boards have to be taught. No matter how many boards people have been on, I think it's always very refreshing to make sure at least annually that you're bringing your board together and you all are co-learning around how this nonprofit runs, how we're setting up policy and procedures here, how we are addressing our governance issues, how we are working on oversight in this organization. Because there is a level of flexibility and uniqueness about different orgs, and we want to make sure that the way that we are growing and building this, not just for the hard tactical decisions that we need to make, but also the soft skills of how we work together, how we navigate change, confusion, uncertainty, conflict, that we are building those skills together. And so to avoid that lack of governance, training, and structure, obviously, I'm going to be biased, you absolutely should have some sort of board governance training that happens at least annually at your annual meeting. We put one on. We have a how to Govern Audaciously as a sort of like a governance 101 is one of the things that we do here at the organization at Ibani Song Solution, along with some other trainings that we have found that have been very important and impactful for organizations around building trust as a board and really figuring out how you sit with and stay with conflict that may pop up or percolate, but definitely impacts the work, and also how you think about growing and scaling so that you're always thinking about building your pipeline, succession planning, bringing people forward so that you have a future-proofed organization, right? The worst thing that could happen is that there's a change in leadership and it completely shuts down your organization. I have seen and lived and worked through the chaos of that. And so our goal, what we call our Audacious Governance Accelerator, is to really help boards know what they need to be doing now, plan for the future, and also really think through some of the softer points of how do we govern together. So if you don't already have a structure for that, I highly, 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 highly encourage that you get one and that you do that at least annually. You all should be having at least an annual meeting, and that could be a great opportunity. It's a way to think about your retreat, maybe bringing some people in to do some governance, make sure that we are all impeccable with what our legal and regulatory requirements are so that we can avoid some of the unforced errors that might be more dangerous in this upcoming sort of regulatory environment. All right, so again, we talked about blind spot number 1, oversight versus operations confusion. Blind spot number 2, lack of governance, training, and structure. Blind spot number 3, some of y'all might really, really, really feel this one, and that is a weak ED board chair partnership. Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it? The EED CEO board chair partnership is a incredible dance that when done well actually really can push an organization forward. People feel supported. They're getting the things that they need. It's fantastic. And when not, well, we're going to talk about what happens when not. So this relationship between your executive director, CEO, and your board chair, and again, I say ED or CEO because different organizations call it differently, but between your most senior leader and your board chair, is the engine of governance. If we can get this relationship right, it has an incredible effect on the rest of what governance looks like, what board management looks like. And so I know there are a lot of other consultants and nonprofit coaches like myself who really specialize in talking about this relationship and figuring out how to make it gel, how to have the proper amount of collaboration and oversight and accountability and all those things, because it really does matter. It can make or break your organization. And it also, obviously there are soft touches. Your board determines and evaluates your executive director, CEO. And so there's a desire to want and have a positive relationship there. And so sometimes there's concern about sharing some of the challenges with your board because of how that might show up in your evaluation. I think that there's also a desire for your board to know and understand what's going on, which could also lead into a creeping in of a sliding into management. And so it's really important that we figure out how we balance this thing We balance the personalities that hold these roles so that the organization can move forward, we can meet the mission. When the ED and board chair are not aligned, you often see and feel tension. And I mean, like, we can slice the tension in the room sometimes, but there is a disconnect there. That is probably one of the number one indicators I see when I observe board meetings and I get to come in and join you all in the space to see and observe how the meetings go. Like, you can feel the tension that's there when that relationship is not aligned. We also see things like mixed messages. It's like, what are we supposed to be doing? Because it sounded like you said this, but now it sounded like you came at me sideways about that. And so those things start to show up. We see slow decision making, an erosion of trust. I actually talk a lot about trust in the work that I do with boards. I have like a board chair coaching program, really specifically looking at how we work with board chairs, especially people who are first-time board chairs. It can be kind of daunting to now be the leader of the board, whether you've been on it before or just sort of happened into that space. And so we have some support that we offer there. And we talk a lot about building a foundation of trust, between the board chair and the executive director, between the board chair and the rest of the board, and then, of course, the board and your senior leadership. And then, of course, your stakeholders, right? It's just layers and layers and layers and layers of trust that we are building out there. And oftentimes when there's lack of alignment, there's an erosion of trust that comes quite rapidly with it, if not preceding that lack of alignment. And then last but not least, we also see staff uncertainty, right? Who are we listening to? It sounded like the board said this. The board chair said that, but now the executive director is telling me to do something different. Like, where do I go? Who do I listen to? What am I supposed to do? A strong partnership changes everything. When we can get this relationship right, it really actually does some incredible things for everybody involved, honestly. Like, the experience of leading change, both as the executive director, the board chair, is completely different. We've seen some improvements with like managing turnover and retention because we have been able to figure out how to work together. And so it can really be an incredible tool to move your organization forward. A weak partnership destabilizes everything. Personalities matter and how we show up, how we leverage power, how we think about the power that we have, how we think about our purpose and the way that we're working, all make a huge difference. And so we want to make sure that this partnership is strong. Oh, goodness. I've done it again. I always do this. I touched the wrong thing on my screen. Sorry about that. I'm back regular size. Anyway, so let's do a reality check moment. I always give you a question that I want you to sit with. And so today's question that I want you to sit with is, which board blind spot is showing up in your organization today? Is it oversight confusion? Is it a lack of training? Or a weak ED chair partnership? Which one of these needs your attention first? And again, I invite you to drop it in the chat, private message me, DM, whatever. I'd love to hear which one of these needs your attention first. And again, if you've been tracking with me, you notice that I've been asking more regularly for you to prioritize a thing, because it can be all the things, right? Like, sometimes it's everything, but we can't attack all the things at the same time. That's very overwhelming. It is a recipe for burnout and turnover, etc. So we are prioritizing. It might be all three of these things, but which one needs our attention first? And if you're looking and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not really sure which one, then let's just do a quick strength scan together. I want you to, in your next check-in one-on-one, ask yourself and your chair these questions. Does everyone understand what governance means? And how sure are we that everyone understands what governance means? That will help you indicate or figure out if there might be some oversight things that are happening that we want to look at. Has the board been trained in the last 12 months? If we haven't done it in the last 12 months, we probably want to put it on the calendar, figure out how we want to make sure that it happens. And I say this in love, even when people are coming from all these board governance programs. I know there are a lot of them out there that are preparing and equipping people to sit on boards, which I think is fantastic. More people need training. The education is great. I have been to some. I have helped lead some. So I think it's fantastic. I also think it's really important that people learn together. So folks are coming with different levels of knowledge, different experiences, different perspectives around how to govern. We still need to get to the place where we're all on the same page, marching in the same direction to the same song, to make sure that board governance actually works for our organization. And then the third question is, are the executive director and chair aligned on priorities and communication? And I name those two because if we aren't aligned, we can definitely start to irritate each other. I was trying to find a more clever way to say that, but we can really start to grind each other's gears if we are not aligned on what the priorities are and communication. How are we going to communicate about these things? Like, do I want you texting me at 10 p.m. or calling me after we just sat through a board meeting to have a separate meeting about the board meeting that we just had? What is our communication style? How do you need to sit with the decision? What is the process that we're going to do this? And when we're not clear on those things, it can lead to some tension. So whichever answer feels uncertain or most agitating, maybe you feel it in your body or you've tensed up, you're stuck, whatever one it is, that might be your biggest vulnerability right now and the place that we want to prioritize first. And I say this again because the atmosphere is changing. If you've been paying attention to what's been happening in 2025, I can't imagine that you have not. We have definitely seen a shift in the way that nonprofits are regarded, the way that they are funded. There are orgs that are fighting left and right in court to try to challenge executive orders that are going to impact the way that nonprofits have been able to do the work, what incentives they can give to people. We have had funders who've pulled back, who have asked for changes in language and priorities. We have seen websites change. We have seen organizations, for safety reasons, decide to pull back some of the information there. Things are different now. And so a poorly trained board is a liability in calm seasons, honestly. It's always a liability if your board is not clear on what they're supposed to be doing. But it is a crisis multiplier in a difficult season. And we are heading into 2026, which will be a difficult season. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that at our Govern Audaciously, How to Protect, Prepare, and Position Your Nonprofit for 2026, which is happening December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern. It is online. I encourage you to join me live. It is free. The cost of attendance is really just your time and attendance. But as we head into 2026, we want to make sure that your board's readiness can help ensure your organization's stability. And so the only way that we can do that is by making sure that we are closing these gaps as soon as possible, as strategically as possible, so that you can better protect your organization, protect your people, protect your mission as we continue to fight in a increasingly changing environment. If you felt that any one of these blind spots today, I want you to pay attention to that. This is where your governance work must begin, and it is an opportunity for you to take the next step and ensure that you are moving your organization forward in the best way that you can, right? Navigating uncertainty, we never really know what anything is going to be. It could be a nothing burger, who knows, right? So far, it's not looking that way at all. I hold out hope, right? The possibility is still there. But in the meantime, we are going to future-proof our organizations. We're going to make sure that we are prepared for whatever storm there is, and that we are rooted in our vision and values and vibrating the way that we need to make sure that we can continue to move the work forward for the communities and causes that we support. And so if you want to get a clearer view of what your organization might be up against, will likely be up against in 2026, along with some key ways to protect yourself starting now so that you can start 2026 with building the armor that your organization needs to continue to do the good work that it is doing, and perhaps even be a little bit more disruptive or intentional about bringing about the future that we all desire, then I encourage you to join me again at Govern Audaciously, How to Protect, Prepare, and Position Your Nonprofit for 2026. We are going live December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern. You can hit the link here. It should be in the caption for this as well and all over my social. I probably am not talking about it enough, but I encourage you to get in the building so that we can have a reasoned conversation about how we can ensure your board is part of the solution as you continue to do incredibly important work, deal with some of our more challenging and complex enduring problems, and actually make sure that we are creating the pipeline for the change that we want to see and building in the protection that needs to happen so that that can be a legacy of change. We don't have to keep fighting the same fights over again. So with that, I hope that you will mark your calendars, that you will go to the link today and register, and that we can be in the quiet space together on December 2nd to really talk more about how we build the organization that will continue to change the world, that will design what's next, and not just be stopped by what is now. With that, I hope you have a great evening. Again, if there are questions, comments, please email me, message me. I would love to be in further conversation with you. If you have listened to this and said, hey, I'm going to be at the training, but actually I already want to get into deeper work. How can we work together? Please reach out. I would love to talk a little bit more about your organization and see if our services are the right fit for you. And in the meantime, come get this free information. I am not gatekeeping, I am safekeeping, but I want to make sure that at least as many people, regardless of your size and budget, who want this information can have this information readily available. And then if you choose to go deeper, we can go deeper to really make sure that you are able to withstand whatever is coming our way. With that, I hope that you have a wonderful evening. We are getting closer to Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays, because I enjoy eating, although I'm hosting this year, so I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy all of that because I don't necessarily love to cook, but we're going to figure it out anyway. And so in the meantime, in between time, I hope that you have a wonderful evening and that you get out there and lead audaciously.